Hello, I'm Shannon Skinner, and this is Extraordinary Women TV. My first guest today is money coach Trish Peterson, who's here to bust our myths around money. Later in the segment, before we take a break, I'll have my regular Good to Know Minute when I ask my guests for their top success tip. You're going to hear Trish's. In the second half of the show, we'll be talking about the joys of womanhood. So stay with us. Trish Peterson, hello.
Hi, Shannon.
It's so nice to have you here. You're a money coach. Really glad to have you on the show, of course, because money is a very important topic on this show and certainly to my viewers. So really grateful that you could be here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a great opportunity. I'm always happy to share the work that I'm doing.
Well, you've had an interesting career, that you were a scientist once upon a time. And now you're a money coach. So let's just talk a little bit about your life as a scientist.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting evolution in my career and in my life. Scientist always, I came to that because I just academically I was strong in that area and led to a career in the pharmaceutical industry where I was a part of ongoing research and drug development and so on. And I spent 15 years in that industry as a scientist, as an interpreter of research, often. Yeah.
And so at some point you decided, enough, I don't want to be a scientist anymore. I want to be a money coach and to help women. So what happened?
Well, I wish it was that clear at that moment. I left my career I think initially wanting to spend more time with my children, who were quite young at the time that I left, and so spent some time really kind of gathering in my what I wanted to do next, and also at the same time spending more time with my kids, and along the way, my family had an experience with inheritance. So I went from being successful in my career, taking a step away from that, then coming into an experience of a new financial experience that I hadn't encountered before. So again, there was I knew there was some underlying emotions, and I could feel some challenges with that weren't being explained or dealt with through the traditional kind of financial advising, estate advising kind of avenues.
So do you mean in terms of guilt around an inheritance?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was one of the, a very strong emotion that I was feeling, and I felt there was really no place to talk about that. So that really, actually, that was one experience that really inspired my work. In between there, I did my training as a life coach, and that's where I started my coaching practice. And it was interesting. I noticed with all of the clients that I was coaching, this was one aspect of their life that they, at all cost, often would avoid talking about and at least resist talking about. And so that also really inspired me to do this work. It felt very important to really give people an opportunity to talk about that aspect of their life that is so key, is their money life, their financial life.
So for you discovered that there are pros and cons to an inheritance.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the pros, obviously, we were in a new financial situation, and along with that comes a sense of responsibility and good stewardship of what to do with that. And again, so there was emotions tied with that. The cons, dealing with the emotions of it, the guilt, the unknowingness. It's just new territory for myself to deal with.
So you you went to a coaching school specifically to help people change their relationships around money.
Yes. I did some additional training with the Money Coaches Institute, Money Coaching Institute in California. And it's founded by a woman who actually had a career in the financial advising industry and really saw an opportunity to help from a different perspective, a more emotional, therapeutic side than the practical, traditional advising side. And so she founded this approach, and she founded a school and trains other coaches to deliver the model of coaching that she does.
And so was it something that you had to go to California for, or did you do it
No,
online?
it was distance training.
Distance training, yeah. Okay, good.
With technology these days, it was fairly easy over Skype and WebEx and all kinds of approaches.
So it's easy. So if anyone's interested out there of doing the same, they could do that.
Yeah, it's Money Coaching Institute, and the founder is Deborah Price.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So how do our emotions impact our finances, and what are the greatest emotions that that impact?
Yeah, well, I think specifically around money, there is a lot of emotion. There's a lot of charge that we as a society hold around money, and I really believe that because we're also in a society that doesn't talk about money. It's it's one of the I think the final taboos that we avoid talking about it. Those thoughts, those emotions, that charge that we have around money really just kind of resides in our subconscious, in our and actually in parts of our brain that that we react to when we're in our day-to-day handling of money. That those emotions are very deeply buried.
So fear, guilt was one that we mentioned earlier, and fear, resentment.
Yeah, anxiety, worthiness, shame. There's so many negative kinds of emotions.
So why can't we talk about money, or why don't we talk about money? I mean, the joke is, you've heard the old adage, it's the two topics people don't talk about are sex and money.
Yeah.
And we're more inclined to talk about sex much more easily, especially as women, than money. So why don't we talk about money? I mean, you go to a party and someone will say, yeah, I landed 10 clients this year. They won't say, yeah, I made another $100,000 because I landed those 10 clients. But there is an avoidance of speaking about money and keeping it really close. So why? What's that all about?
I don't know. I think there's a couple of things going on. I believe that we're in a culture of scarcity. That by saying that, or being in a conversation where somebody is saying that they landed an extra $100,000 in money this year, that somehow that puts the other person at a disadvantage. There's that scarcity notion that it's either you or me, and so there's that competitive kind of feeling, I think, that comes in.
So we feel like we're being judged too.
Yeah, judgment. How do I measure up against another? I think there's a lot of comparison that we do in our culture as well, like compare ourselves against another person. And
so by disclosing what how much money we have, we can either be viewed as, we'll be viewed as not successful.
Yeah, it's like showing our cards.
Or showing off.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think there's a fear of judgment.
Opening the kimono.
Yeah. Fear of judgment, a fear of what does that mean in terms of my sense of belonging in this part of this culture?
Right.
How am I measured up?
Well, what are the trends that you're seeing with women entrepreneurs and money?
Yeah, well, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs as clients, and women entrepreneurs, and what I see a lot of is just in the initial stages of operating one's business is difficulty in pricing their services and valuing their services. Often people come from a culture of like a corporate culture, and they have been valued based on other people's criteria all along. And coming out of that into running your own business, it gets hard to kind of put a value on your own services. So that's often a challenge. There's also
a challenge for men as well.
Absolutely.
Not just women.
Absolutely.
But I know that women are particularly impacted by this.
Yeah. I think with women entrepreneurs also there's a real challenge with asking for the business. I think that I know that men have less trouble with. That there's a resistance to asking for the business. And I think that's just a learned habit that women entrepreneurs, I think, absolutely have the opportunity to learn and to get into the practice of.
Which, of course, impacts our finances.
Absolutely, and that's the bottom line, is how do those behaviors impact your bottom line finances and the success of your business.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, Trish, and we'll pick it up after the break. But before we do, I've got my Good to Know Minute, and I know you've got a great success tip, so jump right in there.
Yes, at the beginning of the show you mentioned money myths, and a great way to bust a money myth is to really take a look at, what do I believe to be true about money? So look at what words would you describe about money, and look at the origin of those words. Look at the culture you were a part of growing up. Was that a description about money that your parents held? Was that a message from your mother or your father? Is that really true for you today? That's the money myth part. Busting it comes from choosing something different. Is that really what I believe today? And is that serving me? And how is that impacting me in my financial life today?
Well, that's great. Well, good to know. Well, thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more about busting money myths and how you can have more prosperity with Trish Peterson. So stay where you are. Hello, I'm Shannon Skinner. Welcome back to the show. I'm speaking with Trish Peterson, who is a money coach, and we're talking about busting money myths. What is the biggest money myth that you've discovered?
One I come across often is there's often a belief or a judgment of people with wealth. And it's
you mean people judging very wealthy people, so people who maybe don't have aren't rich financially, judging those that are. Okay.
Yeah, and the important piece of it is that, as adults, as entrepreneurs, how does that belief impact us today? So often it's a belief that, or a message we grew up with. We were part of a family or somewhere in our background that message was conveyed to us, and we hold on to that message as adults, and somehow it impacts our behaviors in such a way that we then resist wealth. We resist becoming financially successful. We resist achieving our financial goals often because of this underlying belief that somehow if I do, that I will be judged for it.
Do you think that there could be some women would fear, or people in general would fear, if I have that money, I'm going to lose my loved ones? If I'm successful in my business and I make a lot of money, my husband's going to leave me. Do you think that there are those sort of underlying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've come across some of those as well with some of the clients I've worked with. And I think what it comes down to, I think there's an innate human need to feel a sense of belonging. And I think anything that threatens that, and particularly money and financial success, we tend to resist. So that absolutely comes into play. Yeah.
Now, I know that you have on your website money types.
Yes.
Let's just talk about a couple of the money types.
Sure.
That are the most interesting. What's the most common?
Interesting. One of the types, and the most common one I find, and particularly with women, is the innocent type. And the innocent type is one that really chooses. It's that ostrich with its head in the sand kind of metaphor. Really chooses not to be engaged in their day-to-day management of money. Is very dependent on others for that. And
could that be bucking responsibility?
Absolutely.
Is that what that's all about?
Yeah, and telling ourselves that I'm not good with money and therefore somebody else should handle it. That's often a belief that's at the core of that type.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's common.
That's quite common. Yeah, more common than I'd like to imagine. Yeah.
And so what would be another type?
Well, another type that, and it's one that I actually really coach my clients to embrace more of and understand more of is the warrior, the money warrior. And that is a type that's all about action and diligence and discernment, for the sake of a greater purpose. And you think of the metaphor of a warrior, they get it done, and they're very aware of what's going on around them.
The warrior. So, in other words, women should become more of a warrior in the finance area.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And there's a fine distinction between a warrior and a tyrant, which is another type. Which has a little bit more of a negative kind of spin on it. The tyrant is, very diligent and a lot of action around money, but there's very much there's a fear underlying it. There's a real need to control that comes into play there. So that's a difference between a tyrant and a warrior.
So, awaken the warrior inside.
Yes.
If you want to manage your money.
Yeah.
And if you want to grow your wealth.
Yeah.
So I know that we were talking earlier, and you have a few tips on how women can then change their mindsets to have more prosperity. Certainly, we've touched on some of them. Mm-hmm. But one is get curious about your beliefs about money. So the first step really is getting curious.
Absolutely, and as I mentioned in my minute. That really starts with a curiosity, and there, from that place you really can be open to discovering what your beliefs are about money, and then more importantly, how are they impacting my behaviors.
Yeah, more importantly, impacting behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you know if you're sabotaging yourself? I mean, because that's what ends up happening.
Absolutely. I think you often know. I think you have a sense that that's going on, and I think the best place to start is to find somebody to talk about it with. If it's not a money coach, a friend, a partner, and just take the opportunity to get really honest. I think that's how you start to uncover your behaviors.
Being honest.
Yeah.
Being clear and honest.
Yeah.
Ask for help. This is a very difficult thing for women.
Yeah.
For some reason, is it that we are afraid to be vulnerable? Is it that we are afraid that if we're asking for help, we're weak? Mm-hmm. I mean, what's going on? But I mean, one of your tips is to ask for help.
Yeah, I think it's a very important piece of it. I really believe that we don't ask for help often because we feel like we should know. We should know better. We should know more about managing our money. And often we don't know, and there are lots of experts out there that can help us. So it's stepping beyond that sense of shame or disappointment in ourselves and really getting the advice that's available to us out there.
Committing to our financial goals. Mm-hmm. Wow.
That's a big one.
It's a big one.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's making a commitment and setting a goal, making a commitment to it, and committing to take that first step is often, that first step is the biggest step, and but just committing to one step at a time is so important, because the whole picture can look very overwhelming. So the commitment is really focused on a step by step.
What if someone is afraid to commit? And this is a perfect topic. I blogged about this morning, about the being in the maybe gray zone, where someone's not quite ready to commit to saying yes to something or no to something, and they still don't know, but they're in that maybe gray zone, gathering information and researching and feeling like maybe they're indecisive, but underlying it might be fear or guilt or resentment. But what about for someone who knows that they have to set goals? I mean, we know that, right? We do know that, and most people won't set them out, or they will, and they don't follow through. So, but for you say commit. But what if somebody's too afraid to commit? Where do they go from there?
Yeah. As a coach, I encourage people to think about what their life would be like if they were able to achieve that goal. So it's really imagining, envisioning what your life would be like once that goal is reached. And really, the second question and the second kind of curiosity would be around what's holding me back from achieving that. What's holding me back from making that decision and that commitment?
Could be self-worth. Is that often what it is?
Often, yeah. Often that's a big one. Yeah. And that's again tied into experiences and messages growing up as children. Specifically, it always comes around to the conversation about money. That's where the self-worth, some of those pieces of that have come from messages we received as children.
Now, take inventory of your financial assets, of course, is another tip. What should people do? What's the first step to take inventory?
Inventory, I say take inventory of financial assets first, as well as non-financial assets.
Okay.
So financial assets, the first piece is really getting a fix on what's in my bank account, what debts are outstanding, that kind of very basic approach. So there's that aspect of it that is much more the practical end of things. Where I really focus on is taking inventory of your non-financial assets. Your habits and behaviors around money. Where do I spend my money? Taking a look at a monthly cash flow is an important first step. Where does my money go in a month? And you can easily access that through your bank statements online.
And that can be quite a shocker to people. That's really eye-opening, isn't it? I mean, I've done the same and you think, oh my God, I had no idea I spent so much money on that until you actually sat down and saw the number. Yeah, so it's a really important piece of it, is just becoming conscious of your habits around money, your spending habits, your earning habits as well. That's another piece of it. Where have I, fallen short on setting goals? Where have I underestimated my value? Although those pieces are important as well. And another important piece of inventory is what are your skills and talents and abilities that you have as well to bring to that full, more holistic picture of your assets. And one last question, Trish. I mean, what about for women who are married and their husband, they're maybe in a more traditional relationship, and their husband has full control over their finances? What would you suggest to them? It
happens more often, I think, than we realize. Again, I think taking a stand for yourself, being really curious, and I think often women don't even ask. So I think start asking the questions, taking a look at your monthly statements, taking a look at your expenses together, and trying to understand as a starting place where things are at. I think again it goes back to that asking a lot of questions and not being afraid of the answers.
Not being afraid.
Yeah.
Well, Trish, I've really enjoyed this time. Thank you so much for being here and sharing some of your wisdom with my viewers. And I wish you all the best, and hopefully we can do this again in the future.
Great. Thank you, Shannon. It's a pleasure.
Well, for more information about Trish Peterson, Money Coach, you can visit my website, extraordinarywomentv.com. You'll see her episode page with this video, as well as her bio and some other information. Of course, for more information about the show, upcoming episodes, and to contact me, you can also visit the website at extraordinarywomentv.com. Well, in the second half of the show, we are going to be talking about the joys of womanhood. So stay where you are.